The day the empath became more dangerous than the narcissist, Carl Jung discovered something deeply disturbing in his clinical practice that he called shadow integration reversal, a pattern where empaths who finally embrace their suppressed darkness become more psychologically formidable and strategically dangerous than any narcissist could ever dream of being. Wielding their emotional intelligence like a master surgeon wields a scalpel. Jung worked with someone who embodied what he initially considered perfect empathy, a person who spent every waking moment absorbing others' emotions like a psychological sponge, sacrificing their own boundaries at the altar of everyone else's comfort, always putting other people's needs so far ahead of their own that they had practically erased themselves from their own life story. This individual came to Jung's practice as what he termed the ultimate wounded healer, someone who had been pouring endless streams of compassion, understanding, and emotional labor into the world while systematically and completely emptying themselves of any sense of personal worth, boundaries, or self-preservation. For months, Jung observed this person's patterns with growing fascination and concern. They would arrive at sessions emotionally drained from absorbing their family's dysfunction, their workplace's toxic dynamics, their friends' endless relationship dramas, and even strangers' problems that somehow always found their way to this person's doorstep. Jung noted that this individual possessed what he called supernatural emotional radar, an almost frightening ability to detect the slightest shift in someone's mood, to sense unspoken needs, to feel others' pain so intensely that it became their own physical and emotional reality. But then something extraordinary and unprecedented happened in Jung's practice. After years of being emotionally exploited, consistently dismissed, systematically taken for granted, and treated as an endless well of comfort that never needed refilling, this empath reached what Jung termed the sacred breaking point of compassion. But instead of experiencing the breakdown that Jung expected, something far more interesting occurred. They experienced what he called the shadow breakthrough. Jung observed that this person didn't become bitter, vengeful, or emotionally shut down, as he had seen in other cases. Instead, they underwent what he described as conscious integration of rejected power. They began to embrace aspects of themselves they had been taught to suppress: healthy selfishness, strategic thinking, calculated emotional distance, and what Jung called compassionate ruthlessness. This wasn't a loss of empathy. It was an evolution of empathy from unconscious bleeding to conscious choice. The transformation Jung witnessed was remarkable. This person began using their supernatural ability to read people, understand motivations, and predict emotional patterns not to heal everyone around them, but to protect themselves and strategically advance their own goals and well-being. They developed what Jung termed empathic chess mastery, the ability to see multiple moves ahead in any emotional interaction, to understand exactly which buttons to push or not push, and to respond with surgical precision rather than automatic compassion. Jung noted something particularly fascinating. Narcissists, who had previously been able to manipulate this person with ease, became completely powerless against someone who understood the emotional manipulation game better than they did and had consciously chosen when to engage and when to walk away. The integrated empath had become what Jung called immune to emotional parasites, while retaining their capacity for genuine connection with emotionally healthy individuals. This case became the foundation for Jung's understanding of what he termed the dark night of the empath's soul, the necessary journey through shadow integration that transforms unconscious compassion into conscious emotional mastery. Jung realized he had witnessed the birth of something entirely new in human psychology, the strategically empathic individual who could be simultaneously the most compassionate and most psychologically dangerous person in any room, depending on what the situation required. Jung's observations about empathic transformation find profound validation in cutting-edge neuroscience research. Dr. Helene Aron's groundbreaking work at Stony Brook University on highly sensitive persons reveals that empaths possess dramatically enhanced neural connectivity in brain regions responsible for emotional processing, pattern recognition, intuitive understanding, and what researchers call environmental sensitivity processing. Her brain imaging studies show that empaths literally process emotional and sensory information more deeply than the average person, creating both their gift and their vulnerability. When empaths undergo what Jung called individuation with shadow integration, modern neuroscience shows they develop what Dr. Daniel Siegel at UCLA terms integrated neural architecture. This creates someone with the emotional depth and intuitive understanding of a master healer combined with the strategic thinking, boundary management, and self-protective instincts of what Jung called the conscious warrior. Research by Dr. Kristin Neff at University of Texas demonstrates that self-compassion, a crucial component of Jung's shadow integration process, actually increases rather than decreases one's capacity for genuine compassion toward others. Her studies show that individuals who learn to extend empathy toward themselves become more emotionally resilient, more strategically intelligent in their helping behaviors, and less susceptible to emotional manipulation and burnout. Jung coined the term the integrated empath to describe this transformation. Unlike narcissists who manipulate from a place of emotional emptiness, insecurity, and unconscious need, integrated empaths operate from what Jung called emotional abundance with conscious choice. They possess what he termed compassionate cunning, the rare ability to be simultaneously deeply loving and strategically lethal in their understanding of human nature, motivations, and psychological patterns. Dr. Matthew Lieberman's research at UCLA on social brain networks shows that individuals with high empathic capacity who develop strong personal boundaries actually strengthen neural pathways associated with both emotional intelligence and executive function. This creates what Jung predicted: empaths who become more emotionally intelligent, not less, when they learn to protect and prioritize their own well-being. The integrated empath develops what Jung termed selective resonance, the conscious ability to choose which emotions to absorb, which people deserve their emotional energy, and which situations require their intervention versus their strategic withdrawal. This isn't emotional numbing or callousness, it's what Jung called emotional mastery through conscious choice. You just absorbed insights that most people spend decades in therapy trying to understand. Knowledge that transforms everything about how you see yourself and your relationships. This makes you part of what Jung called the emotionally awakened, that rare group of individuals who recognize that true empathy must include having empathy for yourself. Since you've already grasped these profound psychological concepts, subscribe immediately to unlock Jung's deeper strategies for empathic transformation that will completely revolutionize how you navigate every relationship, workplace dynamic, and family situation in your life. Jung's revolutionary concept of shadow integration finds extraordinary validation in current research on neuroplasticity, emotional development, and what scientists now call adaptive psychological flexibility. Dr. Daniel Siegel's extensive work at UCLA demonstrates that individuals with high empathic capacity who learn to set healthy boundaries and practice strategic emotional selectivity actually strengthen neural pathways associated with both emotional intelligence and executive function, creating what Jung predicted would be the psychologically complete human being. The integrated empath develops what Jung termed conscious emotional architecture, a sophisticated internal system for processing, evaluating, and responding to emotional information that goes far beyond simple empathy or basic boundary setting. This involves what modern neuroscience identifies as enhanced connectivity between the prefrontal cortex, strategic thinking, the anterior cingulate cortex, emotional processing, and the insular, intuitive awareness, creating individuals who can simultaneously feel deeply and think strategically. Jung observed that this transformation creates what he called the paradox of empathic power, a psychological phenomenon where the more selectively an empath chooses to offer their emotional energy, the more powerful and transformative their presence becomes to others. The more strategically they say no to emotional manipulation, the more their genuine yes carries weight and meaning. The more they protect their own emotional well-being, the more capable they become of genuinely helping others from a place of strength rather than wound. Research by Dr. Kristin Neff at University of Texas reveals that self-compassion, which Jung identified as essential for shadow integration, actually increases one's capacity for what she calls fierce compassion toward others. This isn't the passive, self-sacrificing compassion that leaves empaths drained and exploited. It's what Jung termed warrior compassion, the ability to care deeply while maintaining psychological sovereignty and strategic awareness. Dr. Brené Brown's research on vulnerability and shame confirms Jung's observations about empathic transformation. Her studies show that individuals who learn to set boundaries and practice self-compassion become more emotionally generous, not less, because they're operating from emotional abundance rather than emotional depletion. This creates what Jung called sustainable empathy, the ability to maintain compassionate engagement with others over time without burning out or becoming resentful. Jung noted that integrated empaths develop what he termed psychological immunity to manipulation. Unlike narcissists who manipulate unconsciously from their own wounds and needs, integrated empaths understand manipulation so deeply, both how to recognize it and theoretically how to employ it, that they become essentially immune to emotional predators. They can see manipulation coming from miles away and choose their response from a place of strength rather than automatic reaction. The transformation Jung witnessed creates individuals with what modern psychology recognizes as secure attachment with strategic awareness. They can form deep, meaningful connections with emotionally healthy people while maintaining complete psychological protection from those who would exploit their empathic gifts. Jung called this conscious love versus unconscious sacrifice. A marketing executive I know spent the first decade of her career embodying what Jung would call the unconscious empath in corporate America. She was always the first person colleagues came to with their problems, consistently volunteering for extra projects that others couldn't or wouldn't handle, absorbing the stress and emotional chaos of every team conflict, and never advocating for her own promotions or raises because she had been conditioned to believe that putting herself first was somehow selfish or wrong. This person would arrive at work early to help overwhelmed colleagues, stay late to finish projects that weren't her responsibility, and spend her lunch breaks listening to co-workers' personal problems instead of taking care of her own needs. She had become what Jung termed the office emotional janitor, cleaning up everyone else's psychological messes while her own career stagnated and her personal well-being deteriorated. The transformation began when she started recognizing these patterns through what Jung called conscious observation of unconscious behaviors. Instead of automatically absorbing every workplace crisis, she began what Jung would term strategic empathy, using her supernatural ability to read office politics, understand hidden motivations, and predict interpersonal dynamics, not to fix everyone's problems, but to position herself strategically for advancement and protection. She started applying Jung's principles of selective resonance in remarkable ways. When colleagues came to her with problems, instead of automatically taking on their emotional burdens, she began assessing whether helping them would advance her own goals or simply drain her energy for others' benefit. She learned to say phrases like, "That sounds really challenging. I trust you'll figure out the best solution," instead of immediately diving in to solve problems that weren't hers to solve. Within 6 months of implementing Jung's empathic integration principles, she was promoted twice, not through manipulation or playing political games, but through conscious application of her emotional intelligence for her own benefit while maintaining genuine connections with colleagues who deserved her energy. She had learned what Jung called the art of strategic compassion. Someone in my community discovered that their lifelong role as what Jung would call the family emotional regulator was actually enabling dysfunction and preventing family members from developing their own emotional maturity. For 30 years, this person had been the go-to family member for every crisis, conflict, and emotional meltdown. They were always the one mediating arguments between siblings, absorbing their parents' marital problems, counseling relatives through divorces, and providing financial and emotional support to family members who seemed incapable of managing their own lives. This person's home had become what Jung might call the family emotional emergency room, a place where everyone brought their problems to be fixed, but no one ever seemed to learn how to prevent or solve these problems themselves. Family members would call at all hours with crises, show up unannounced expecting emotional labor, and become angry or manipulative when this person wasn't immediately available to solve their problems. The transformation began when this individual started implementing what Jung called empathic boundaries with conscious consequence. Instead of being available for every family crisis, they began setting specific times when they would and wouldn't be available for family emotional support. Instead of immediately jumping in to mediate every family conflict, They began responding with phrases like, "It sounds like you and your brother need to work this out directly," and "I have confidence in your ability to handle this situation." The family initially resisted these changes dramatically. Some members accused this person of becoming selfish, cold, or uncaring. Others tried guilt, manipulation, and even threats to restore the old dynamic, where this person served as the family's unpaid therapist and emergency emotional fund. But something remarkable happened over time. Family members began developing what Jung called emotional self-sufficiency. They started solving their own problems, having direct conversations with each other instead of using this person as a go-between, and taking responsibility for their own emotional well-being. The family actually became healthier and more functional when the designated empath stopped enabling dysfunction. This person went from being what Jung called the family emotional servant to being the family success story, someone who maintained loving connections while refusing to sacrifice their own well-being for others' comfort with dysfunction. A friend recently shared how they completely transformed their romantic life through implementing Jung's principles of empathic integration and shadow work. For years, their dating pattern had been what Jung would recognize as the wounded healer seeking wounded souls to fix. They consistently attracted partners who were emotionally unavailable, dealing with addiction issues, struggling with mental health challenges, or carrying massive amounts of unprocessed trauma. This person's relationships always followed the same exhausting pattern. They would meet someone who seemed to need their empathic gifts, pour enormous amounts of emotional energy into trying to heal or fix their partner, sacrifice their own needs and boundaries for the relationship, and eventually burn out when they realized they were giving everything and receiving very little genuine love or emotional reciprocity in return. Their home had become what Jung might call a relationship rehabilitation center, where they were always the therapist, the supporter, the emotional caretaker, and the one responsible for making the relationship work, while their partners remained emotionally passive recipients of their empathic labor. The transformation began when this person started using their empathic abilities not to identify people who needed fixing, but to identify people who were already emotionally mature, self-aware, and capable of genuine reciprocity. Instead of being attracted to emotional projects, they began what Jung would call conscious partner selection based on emotional health rather than emotional need. They started applying empathic intelligence to evaluate potential partners' emotional availability, communication skills, self-awareness, and capacity for mutual support before getting emotionally invested. They learned to recognize the difference between someone who was temporarily going through challenges and handling them maturely versus someone who lived in perpetual emotional chaos and expected others to manage their inner world for them. The shift was dramatic. Instead of attracting partners who needed rescuing, they began attracting partners who matched their emotional depth and availability. Their relationships transformed from being rescue missions to being genuine partnerships between two emotionally integrated adults who chose each other from a place of strength rather than need. You made it this far because you possess something most people never develop: the rare combination of deep emotional intelligence and the courage to examine your own patterns honestly. Join our community of integrated empaths by subscribing, because together we're pioneering a completely new understanding of what it means to be both profoundly compassionate and psychologically powerful in a world that has tried to convince us we must choose between caring for others and caring for ourselves. Stage 1. The Recognition Awakening. Jung identified this as the crucial first stage where empaths begin to see their unconscious patterns with startling clarity. This involves what he called conscious observation of automatic empathic responses, becoming aware of how you automatically absorb others' emotions, immediately jump into fixing mode when someone expresses distress, or sacrifice your own needs without even thinking about it. During this stage, integrated empaths begin to notice what Jung termed the empathic drain pattern, recognizing that certain people, situations, or environments consistently leave them feeling emotionally exhausted, resentful, or depleted. They start to identify what Jung called emotional energy vampires, individuals who seem to take far more emotional energy than they ever give back. The recognition stage also involves acknowledging what Jung called the empathic superiority complex, the unconscious belief that your empathy makes you morally superior to others. that you're somehow responsible for everyone else's emotional well-being, or that setting boundaries makes you a bad person. Jung observed that this superiority complex often masks deep feelings of worthlessness and the unconscious belief that your value as a person depended on how much you could sacrifice for others. Practical application involves keeping what Jung might call an empathic energy audit, tracking which interactions energize you versus which drain you, which people reciprocate your emotional investment versus which only take, and which situations bring out your best qualities versus which trigger your rescuing patterns. This stage requires what Jung called ruthless honesty with yourself about your motivations, examining whether your helping behaviors stem from genuine compassion or from unconscious needs for validation, control, or purpose. Stage 2. Shadow acknowledgement and integration. Jung considered this the most challenging but essential stage of empathic transformation. This involves embracing what he called the rejected aspects of empathic nature, acknowledging that you have needs, desires, ambitions, and even selfish impulses that are completely valid and psychologically healthy. During shadow acknowledgement, integrated empaths learn to embrace what Jung termed holy selfishness, the recognition that taking care of your own emotional, physical, and spiritual needs isn't selfish. It's essential for sustainable empathy. This stage involves accepting that you have the right to say no without explanation, to prioritize your own goals and dreams, and to expect reciprocity in relationships. Jung observed that empaths often suppress what he called natural psychological aggression, the healthy ability to compete, to advocate for yourself, to stand up to people who treat you poorly, and to pursue your own interests even when others disapprove. Shadow integration involves reclaiming these suppressed aspects of personality, not to become mean or manipulative, but to become psychologically complete. This stage also requires what Jung called grieving the false empathic identity, letting go of the belief that your worth depends on how much you can sacrifice for others, that being needed is the same as being loved, or that you're responsible for managing everyone else's emotions. This grieving process can be intense because it often involves recognizing how much of your life energy you've given away unconsciously. Practical application involves deliberately practicing what Jung called conscious selfishness, making decisions based on your own needs and desires, saying no to requests that don't serve your well-being, and asking for what you want directly instead of hoping others will intuitively understand your needs. Stage 3. Boundary architecture and construction. Jung described this stage as building what he called conscious emotional barriers, developing sophisticated internal systems for protecting your emotional energy while maintaining your capacity for genuine connection. This isn't about building walls. It's about building what Jung termed permeable membranes that let in what serves you and filter out what doesn't. Boundary architecture involves learning what Jung called emotional triage, quickly assessing which situations require your empathic attention, which people deserve your emotional energy, and which problems are not yours to solve. This requires developing what Jung termed intuitive discernment, trusting your gut feelings about people and situations instead of overriding your instincts with empathic guilt. During this stage, integrated empaths learn to distinguish between what Jung called authentic empathy versus empathic compulsion. Authentic empathy is a conscious choice to connect with and support someone. Empathic compulsion is an unconscious reaction driven by guilt, fear, or the need to be needed. Jung observed that healthy boundaries actually increase rather than decrease empathic effectiveness. When you protect your emotional energy, you have more genuine compassion available for situations that truly warrant your attention. When you stop trying to help everyone, your help becomes more valuable and transformative for those who receive it. Practical application involves developing what Jung might call boundary scripts, prepared responses for common situations where people try to violate your boundaries. This includes learning to say things like, "I care about you, but I'm not available to help with this right now. That sounds really challenging. I trust you'll find the right solution. And I understand this is important to you, but it's not something I can take on." Stage 4. Selective resonance mastery. Jung considered this stage the development of what he called conscious emotional choice, the ability to deliberately decide which emotions to absorb, which people to emotionally resonate with, and which situations require your empathic engagement versus your strategic withdrawal. Selective resonance involves learning what Jung termed empathic discernment, using your emotional intelligence not just to understand others, but to evaluate whether connecting with specific individuals or situations serves your well-being and growth. This requires developing what Jung called strategic empathy, the ability to understand someone's emotional state without automatically taking responsibility for fixing or absorbing it. During this stage, integrated empaths learn to distinguish between what Jung called energy givers versus energy takers in their social environment. They become skilled at identifying people who reciprocate emotional investment, appreciate empathic support, and contribute positively to relationships versus those who drain emotional energy without giving back. Jung observed that selective resonance allows empaths to maintain their gift for deep emotional connection while developing immunity to emotional manipulation and toxic dynamics. They learn what he called conscious emotional participation, choosing when to engage emotionally and when to maintain protective psychological distance. Practical application involves what Jung might call daily empathic inventory, regularly assessing your emotional state, identifying what or whom might be draining your energy, and making conscious choices about how to redirect your empathic attention toward people and situations that deserve and appreciate it. Stage 5. Strategic application of empathic intelligence. Jung described this transformative stage as learning to use your empathic gifts not just for others' benefit, but consciously for your own advancement, protection, and well-being. This isn't manipulation. It's what Jung called intelligent self-advocacy using empathic understanding. Strategic application involves using your supernatural ability to read people, understand motivations, and predict emotional patterns to make better decisions about career advancement, relationship choices, and life direction. Instead of only using empathic intelligence to help others, you begin using it to help yourself navigate the world more effectively. During this stage, integrated empaths learn what Jung called empathic chess thinking, the ability to anticipate how others will respond emotionally to different situations and to position yourself strategically based on this understanding. This includes knowing when to share personal information, when to maintain privacy, which people to trust with your vulnerabilities, and which people require more careful management. Jung observed that strategic empaths become extraordinarily effective in professional and personal contexts because they can understand what motivates others while maintaining clear awareness of their own goals and boundaries. They develop what he called compassionate cunning, the ability to be simultaneously understanding and strategically intelligent in their interactions. Practical application involves consciously using your empathic insights to make better choices about everything, from job negotiations to family dynamics. This includes reading emotional subtext in conversations, understanding the real motivations behind people's requests, and positioning yourself advantageously based on your deep understanding of human psychology. Stage 6. Compassionate cunning development. Jung identified this as perhaps the most sophisticated stage of empathic integration, developing what he called the ability to be simultaneously loving and strategically formidable. Compassionate cunning involves maintaining your capacity for genuine care and connection while becoming impossible to manipulate, exploit, or emotionally abuse. This stage involves what Jung termed empathic chess mastery, the ability to understand others' emotional strategies so completely that you can respond with surgical precision rather than automatic compassion. You maintain your ability to love deeply while developing what Jung called strategic emotional intelligence. Compassionate cunning means becoming skilled at what Jung called conscious emotional positioning, understanding exactly how your empathic responses affect others and choosing your reactions based on what will produce the most positive outcome for everyone involved, including yourself. Jung observed that empaths who develop compassionate cunning become uniquely powerful in their relationships and professional lives because they combine emotional depth with strategic awareness. They can navigate complex interpersonal dynamics with what he called loving precision, responding to others with both understanding and intelligent self-protection. During this stage, integrated empaths learn to distinguish between people who deserve their empathic generosity and those who would exploit it. They develop what Jung called discerning love, the ability to care for others while maintaining complete clarity about their own needs and boundaries. Practical application involves learning to respond to emotional manipulation with what Jung might call strategic compassion, understanding the manipulator's emotional needs while refusing to be controlled by them. This includes responses like, "I can see you're really struggling with this and I want you to find the right support for what you're dealing with," acknowledging their pain while redirecting responsibility back to them. Stage 7. Empowered service and conscious choice. Jung described this stage as the transformation from what he called compulsive helping to conscious service, moving from automatic empathic reactions to deliberate choices about when, how, and whom to help based on your own values, energy levels, and life goals. Empowered service involves operating from what Jung termed emotional abundance rather than emotional depletion. When you help others from this stage, it's because you genuinely choose to, not because you feel guilty, obligated, or afraid of others' reactions. Your helping becomes more effective because it comes from strength rather than wound. During this stage, integrated empaths develop what Jung called sustainable compassion practices, ways of caring for others that don't drain your own resources or create unhealthy dependency dynamics. This includes teaching others to develop their own emotional skills rather than constantly rescuing them from their emotional challenges. Jung observed that empowered service creates what he called transformational helping relationships, where your empathic support actually helps others develop their own emotional intelligence and resilience, rather than becoming dependent on your emotional labor. This stage involves what Jung termed conscious reciprocity awareness, choosing relationships and helping situations where there's mutual support, appreciation, and energy exchange, rather than one-sided emotional giving. Practical application involves regularly evaluating your helping relationships and service commitments to ensure they align with your values and serve your well-being as well as others. This includes ending helping relationships that have become codependent and focusing your empathic energy on situations where it can create genuine positive transformation. Stage 8. Mastery integration and psychological sovereignty. Jung considered this the ultimate stage of empathic development, what he called complete psychological sovereignty with maintained empathic gifts. At this stage, integrated empaths have what Jung termed conscious control over their empathic responses, while retaining their capacity for deep emotional connection and understanding. Mastery integration involves what Jung called fluid empathic boundaries, the ability to consciously open to emotional connection when it serves love and growth, and to consciously protect your emotional space when necessary for your well-being. This isn't emotional rigidity, it's emotional intelligence at its highest level. During this stage, integrated empaths develop what Jung termed empathic leadership abilities, using their emotional intelligence and hard-won wisdom to guide others through their own empathic integration process. They become what Jung called wounded healers, who have transformed their wounds into wisdom. Jung observed that empaths who reach mastery integration become naturally magnetic to emotionally healthy people, while becoming naturally repelling to emotional predators and manipulators. They develop what he called authentic emotional presence that attracts genuine relationships while deterring exploitative ones. This stage involves what Jung termed empathic mentorship capacity, the ability to teach other empaths how to develop healthy boundaries, strategic awareness, and sustainable compassion practices without losing their empathic gifts. Practical application involves using your integrated empathic abilities to create positive change in your personal relationships, professional environment, and broader community while maintaining complete psychological sovereignty and emotional well-being. You've now received what amounts to years of psychological education condensed into profound, immediately applicable insights. Your journey toward empathic integration starts with one powerful declaration that signals to your unconscious mind that you're ready to reclaim your empathic power. Write in the comments, "I choose conscious compassion over unconscious sacrifice." This statement activates what Jung called empathic sovereignty and connects you with our growing community of strategically compassionate individuals who understand that true empathy includes empathy for yourself. You've already proven you possess rare emotional intelligence and the courage for psychological growth by engaging with these concepts so deeply. Subscribe right now because people like you deserve complete access to Jung's most transformative insights about empathic integration and psychological sovereignty. hit like to demonstrate that this level of psychological truth and empathic wisdom matters in a world that desperately needs conscious empaths who understand how to be both deeply compassionate and strategically powerful. Your next breakthrough is waiting in our upcoming revelation about Jung's concept of the empathic dark night of the soul. Jung discovered something profound about the psychological journey that empaths must take to transform from unconscious emotional servants into conscious emotional sovereigns. The insights we'll share will completely revolutionize everything you thought you knew about the relationship between empathy, personal power, and psychological transformation. This is just the beginning of your empathic evolution,